The alien had laughed the way only a creature with 3 lungs and a stiff sense of superiority could, a resonant, trilling chortle that vibrated across the thin polymer corridor separating the human housing block from the rest of the dome. The entire colony had heard it, every engineer, every diplomat, every poor maintenance worker trying to ignore the politics of breathing recycled air in somebody else's territory. It wasn't the first time a Zelvari neighbor mocked a human invention, but this time it came with a special sting. Because Jace Ardent wasn't building something ridiculous. He was trying to keep everyone alive. The dome, their dome, a joint venture of human stubbornness and Zelvari architectural pride, was beginning to fail. Microfractures spidered along the inner curvature, invisible to the eye, yet loud as thunder in the colony's structural readings. The official council meetings had devolved into arguments, the Zelvari insisting the dome simply needed recalibration, the humans pointing out that recalibration didn't work on materials that were literally cracking. And so, in the most human way imaginable, Jace had stopped waiting for permission. He grabbed tools. He grabbed scrap, he grabbed whatever polymer sheets and reinforcement beams weren't nailed down or politically protected, and he built a wall, a second wall, a wall inside the dome. To the Zelvari it was a cultural insult. Their architecture was sacred geometry. Their engineering followed precise fractal ratios that no human eye could truly appreciate. To add a random asymmetrical, brutishly simple barrier beneath their mathematically perfect construct, barbaric, childish, slightly hilarious to humans. It was Tuesday, so when the alien neighbor Dencor of the Luminous Crest, self-proclaimed keeper of Zelvari aesthetic purity, stood outside Jace's habitat door and wheezed laughter until his frilled crest turned lavender with exertion. The rest of the colony simply waited for Jace's reaction. Some bet he'd argue. Others thought he'd shout. A few predicted he'd throw a wrench. Instead, he opened the door, stared at the trembling-lipped alien, and said the most disarming words in human vocabulary. "You're going to regret laughing." Dencor blinked, crest folding back in confusion. "Regret? Over a second wall?" "Yep, a wall that violates all principles of load distribution." "Sure does. And disrupts the resonance flow of dome harmonics. With style. Human, you can barely maintain your own oxygen scrubber. Which is why I built a second one last month," Jace replied. "You're welcome." And then he simply closed the door in Dencor's face. The legend of that moment would travel through the colony for weeks. But the real story began not with the laughter and not even with the human stubbornness, though those were important elements, but with the quiet, creeping dread humming inside the dome's foundation every night. Jace heard it through the floor panels of his small living unit, the whispering groan of stressed materials, a kind of metallic heartbeat slowing down a little more each cycle. Humans weren't naturally gifted at detecting structural resonance, but long nights alone in a half-functioning room made a man sensitive to sounds most people ignored. He couldn't shake it, couldn't sleep through it, couldn't trust the council committees assigned to explore potential solutions with cultural sensitivity. So he'd spent 3 weeks mapping the dome's weak points, 3 more gathering supplies, and then he'd built the first segment of the wall. Not a beautiful wall, not a mathematically perfect one, but a thick, ugly reinforcement barrier designed to take shear loads, redistribute stress, and if he was lucky prevent catastrophic dome implosion. Dencor wasn't the only Zelvari who had mocked him. Several had hovered near the construction site offering unsolicited commentary like, "Human, you do realize that structure is lopsided. Your beams do not follow the harmonic sequence of the dome's construction. Why is it that height? Nothing in your species is standardized." But Jace had never built structures to impress his critics. He built them to work. By the end of the 4th week, his second wall spanned nearly 1/3 of the dome's interior curve, braced against the most fracture-prone arcs. Some humans helped, a few engineers, a couple of off-duty drone operators, even a botanist who admitted she just wanted to hit something with a hammer. Zelvari assistance was non-existent, pride being a heavier burden than gravity, but their curiosity grew as the wall did still. Dencor laughed the loudest. He laughed when J welded the reinforcement struts. He laughed when the polymer adhesive refused to behave. He laughed when Jace tripped over a toolbox and nearly recreated Newton's third law on his own kneecaps. But on the 26th day, hours before the dome's monthly atmospheric cycling, everything changed. The first crack sounded like a deep exhale, a release of tension, a warning. Then came the second. Then the alarm. Structural failure alerts flashed crimson across every corridor panel. Residents scrambled toward shelters. Pressure equalization locks slammed down. And for a terrifying moment, everyone believed the dome would fail completely. Jace didn't run. He sprinted straight to his wall. Because he already knew what the readings would say, knew exactly where the failure was happening, knew that the council, in their desire to preserve aesthetics and procedure, it had delayed reinforcement until too late. He slapped on his helmet and ran across the trembling floor as Dencor and several other Zelvari crouched behind a collapsed decorative support beam. The alien's crest was completely deflated. Now fear made it shrink tight against his skull. His 3 lungs fluttered in rapid succession, producing a terrified clicking sound instead of laughter. Human, Dencor shouted. The dome, it's destabilizing. We must evacuate. No time, Jace said, breath harsh inside his helmet. Get behind the wall. The what? The wall you built for your human paranoia. The same one you laughed at, Jace said, tugging Dencor to his feet. Move. A thunderous crack split the air. The dome's outer harmonics failed in a shuddering wave, like glass flexing under impossible pressure. Panels warped. Fractures spread. And the second wall, ugly, asymmetrical, human-made, held Zelvari huddled on one side. Humans braced on the other. The colony watched as the force that should have collapsed the dome dissipated across Jace's badly proportioned, heavily reinforced barrier. It wasn't perfect, but it bought time that meant survival. And as Dencor stared at the trembling structure, his crest slowly lifting in stunned realization, he whispered, "This wall saved us." Jace steadied himself against the vibrating polymer and muttered, "Told you you'd regret laughing." This was not yet the end of the dome's crisis, but it was the moment the galaxy's cold, elegant species first understood a fundamental truth of humanity when everything is on the line. Humans don't build pretty solutions. They build the ones that work. Keller's ears, or what humans would call frilled extensions, shifted forward. You do not recoil. You do not protest. You accept. Accept what? Jace asked, genuinely. That I carry you, that I'm wearing your jacket. The bond. The eternal bond. He froze. Wait, eternal. She nodded, crystalline eyelids shimmering. The bond is permanent. It cannot be undone once the first ritual is completed. Well, he muttered. That escalated quickly. Keller's breathing became rapid, almost musical, clicking in time with the residual hum of the dome's structural pulses. Do you understand? Honestly, no. I barely understand the concept of my own breakfast most mornings. Can we maybe take this slow? Slow, she whispered, horrified, glowing slightly. Human, you are mocking me. You cannot undo this. He held up his hands, palms wide. No mockery, just severe confusion. You almost died. I didn't want you to die. I didn't know this ritual thing existed. And now everyone is watching like I'm suddenly the galaxy's most romantic engineer. She blinked again. Yes, you are, he groaned. Oh, great. Fantastic. So now I'm a hero and a husband. What did I do yesterday? Oh, right. I woke up and fixed the coffee machine. Kayla pressed a hand to his chest, more like a ceremonial touch than an affectionate gesture. Valeri elders watching through surveillance networks immediately took note. Yes, he is worthy, one elder hummed. Human exhibits compassion, bravery, and reckless charm. Reckless charm, Jace muttered under his breath. That's my official title now. Kayla looked embarrassed, and somehow her shimmering glow intensified. Jace caught himself staring, and that was immediately misread as intentional attraction, which, in the eyes of Valeri law, meant he had accepted the bond. Jace panicked. Okay, no, let's stop, can we? Pretend this isn't happening. Kayla tilted her head. Pretend. Her entire species would have interpreted that as a polite refusal, and yet she hesitated. Human, that is done. Pretend is impossible. Of course it's impossible, he muttered. Nothing human is simple. And just like that, the galaxy's most unintended engagement had officially begun. The next few hours passed in a haze of absurdity. Jace trying to explain it was literally just first aid to the Valeri elders, who took every word as a further vow. Kayla, attempting to clarify her confusion, only making things worse by her accidental compliance with every gesture he made. The colony watching in disbelief as the human boy stood bewildered while the alien girl glimmered beside him like a living jewel. Her entire species convinced they were bonded for life. At one point, Jace muttered, "Great, I'm probably supposed to kiss her now or something." Kayla froze. Do humans always respond with lips? He blinked. No, usually. I mean sometimes. It depends on the movie. I don't know your rules. I'm very confused. She took a careful step closer, clearly trying to process both human intent and alien custom, which only deepened the cosmic misunderstanding. By the end of the day, the council had officially recorded Jace Arden, galaxy's most compassionate human male. Kayla bound to said human for life pending observation. Humanity, odd species, excellent at survival and emotional chaos. And Jace, staring at the glowing, shimmering alien beside him, muttered, "I just saved a life. How did this happen?" The galaxy, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. The dome had survived, and for one fleeting glorious moment, Jace thought he could breathe. The stress alerts had quieted, the creaking panels hummed a slightly less panicked tune, and even Dencor's crest, still twitching with disbelief, had partially regained its height. But in the galaxy, nothing simple ever lasted. The humans were relieved, the Zelvari were aghast, and somewhere in the middle, Kayla appeared, who had been trapped in the shuttle wreck for nearly an hour. Her crystalline fingers curled around fractured control levers, had witnessed everything from the inside, the wall, the shouts, the terrifying inevitability of the dome deciding it hated everyone equally. And when Jace had lifted her out, wrapped her in his jacket, and carried her to safety like a human hero from one of the pre-collapse horror movies, The Valeri elders watching remotely had collectively fainted. Not literally fainting wasn't a Valeri trait, but their cultural equivalent. A sort of internal fractal collapse of mental focus had occurred in their eyes. Jace had performed the first 3 stages of an ancient soul-bonding ritual, wrapping the jacket over her. The Valeri called it the shield of claim, carrying her, the bonded transport. Speaking softly, that was interpreted as the whisper of intention, and Kayla, blinking in the human's uneven grip, looked up at him, dazed, overwhelmed, and utterly certain that she was now bound for life. "Kayla, you okay?" Jace asked, trying not to sound panicked, which was impossible. She froze, her metallic eyes wide, and finally spoke. "You have done what I saved you, that's all," he said. Simple, honest, human. In any other species' terms, entirely unremarkable. "Saved me." Her voice wavered. "Human, you do not understand the implication of your actions." He scratched the back of his neck. "Right, implication. Yeah, I'm terrible at those. Can you maybe spell it out?" She hesitated, flustered, shifting her weight like a crystal, being unsure if she'd just tripped over her own heart. "You have engaged in the ritual of eternal commitment." "Oh, for crying out loud," Jace muttered. "I just wanted you not to die." "Yes, but that is exactly what a bonded human does, is it not?" Her whisper trembled like the last leaf in a storm. "Do you not feel it?" Jace blinked. "Feel what?" "Connection." Jace glanced around. "Connection." The dome was trembling slightly from residual strain. The monitors still flickered warnings at him, but the human part of him, the part with too much empathy and entirely too little understanding of alien customs, felt something small and stubborn in his chest. Concern, relief, probably affection. The next morning, the dome felt smaller. Somehow, the corridors had shrunk overnight, or maybe it was just Jace's perception. Every glance from Caleb, every subtle shimmer of her crystalline skin, every careful tilt of her frilled extensions reminded him that he was now, officially and entirely, part of a cosmic misunderstanding that was simultaneously terrifying and vaguely thrilling. Kayla had insisted on accompanying him through the repair rounds, not because she was skilled in structural engineering. Her species' expertise lay in diplomacy, energy harmonics, and, occasionally, laser-etched crystal art, but because she claimed it was necessary to monitor the bond stability. Jace was still unsure whether bond stability referred to structural integrity, emotional attachment, or a subtle combination of both. As they walked side by side, the humans in the corridors gave him knowing smirks. The Zelvari, meanwhile, regarded him with a mixture of awe, fear, and what could only be described as restrained envy. They whispered about the human who had claimed a heart with nothing but reckless kindness. Jace wanted to tell them it hadn't been deliberate, that he had no idea what he was doing, that he wasn't even sure how human romance technically worked most mornings before coffee. But words failed him, and apparently, actions spoke louder than explanations. Kaela, for her part, was practicing subtle touches, brushing a hand against his sleeve when the corridor shuddered, lightly tapping his shoulder when a panel creaked ominously. Every gesture she made, she later confessed, was a deliberate test of his human intent. Every time he reacted with calm concern rather than avoidance, she catalogued it as proof of devotion. Jace, oblivious to most of this, kept muttering things like, "You really shouldn't be touching things like that," or "Careful, that's still hot." His hands were full of tools, his mind full of survival strategy, his heart increasingly full of something he didn't yet have words for. By mid-afternoon, the structural repairs had reached a critical point. Panels needed realignment, support beams were at odd angles, and one section of the wall still groaned with protest. Kayla insisted on helping, which was fine in theory. In practice, she had the grace of a dancer but the strength of a diplomat who had been trained never to lift more than ceremonial objects. Her attempts to hold beams steady were heroic, but also terrifying. Every time a beam slipped, Jace's reflexes kicked in, a hand grabbing, a push, a muttered curse. "Careful," he shouted once, just as her shoulder grazed a live conduit. Sparks arced, the fluorescent lights flickered, and Kayla froze, her eyes wide in a mixture of fear and fascination. "You are remarkably alive," she whispered, half in wonder, half in accusation. "You do not flinch from danger for yourself, only for me." Jace frowned. "Yeah, that's kind of what humans do. We care about other humans, or apparently other alien types, sometimes too much. And also, it's instinct. Please don't fry yourself again. You do not understand the effect of your words." She stepped closer, not in threat, but in gravity, her entire being leaning subtly toward him as if she were tethered by invisible strings. "Each sound you make resonates through my core. Every caution, every muttered curse, every concern." "Yes?" he asked cautiously, not wanting to encourage something he didn't understand. "Is interpreted as devotion." Jace blinked. "Oh well, then, I guess I am devoted," he grimaced, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. "I mean, wait, don't answer that yet. I don't know what I'm saying." Keeler's laughter, the closest equivalent humans could describe it as. A gentle trill through 3 resonant tones filled the corridor. "You are a human," she said, completely unprepared, reckless, warm beyond measure. confusing to all reason. And yet, she looked down at her feet, then back at him, her glow shifting through a spectrum of pastel hues. I am glad you exist. For once Jace was entirely speechless. They continued the repairs, side by side, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Each brush of a hand, each accidental bump, each glance lasted longer than necessary. Every Valeri observer, hidden cameras, council liaisons, and Keller's hovering guardians recorded it all, analyzing human emotion with meticulous concern. They whispered about the bond deepening and emotional acceleration, while Jace muttered under his breath about how humans had never gotten this complicated before lunch. By evening, the final support beams were set. The dome was no longer groaning in imminent collapse. The emergency readings had normalized, but Jace and Kayla were still standing in the center of the repaired section, staring at each other with the awkward intensity of two beings who understood everything and nothing all at once. You risked yourself, Kayla said softly. For me, without expectation, without calculation. Why? Jace shrugged, finally letting some fatigue catch him. I don't know. Humans do weird things. Sometimes we help because it feels right. Sometimes we do it because we like someone enough to not let them die, even if we barely know them. Keller's glow intensified. You feel something then? Jace swallowed hard. I think I do, but I have no idea what it is called in your species. Her crystalline hand hovered near his arm, then withdrew, then hovered again. It is terrifying. Yeah, and confusing. And probably very, very bad for interstellar diplomacy. She laughed softly, shaking her head. And yet, I would not wish to undo it. He blinked. You wouldn't? I would not, she confirmed. You saved me. You did not know what would happen. And yet you were human, compassionate, reckless, confusing, entirely alive. That is enough. Jace exhaled slowly, feeling some tension release, some clarity settle. So, does that mean maybe we're okay? Kayla smiled faintly, the pastel glow steadying. We are human and Valeri. That is enough. And in that moment, the galaxy could have collapsed around them, or erupted in war, or the dome could have crumbled entirely. It would not have mattered. They were tethered, not by ceremony, not by law, but by a simple, reckless human truth. Sometimes saving a life was enough to create a bond neither species could ignore. For the first time since the accident, the dome was quiet. Not the ominous, creaking quiet of imminent collapse, but the soft, living kind where machinery hummed in harmony and the lights glowed steady and warm. Jace stood near the observation window, watching the horizon shimmer beneath the dome's repaired surface. He told himself he was waiting for the final diagnostic results, but he knew he was really waiting for her. Kaela arrived the way she always did, with footsteps so light they barely stirred the air and a presence that somehow filled the space entirely as soon as she entered. Her crystalline skin glowed in subtle gradients, calm colors this time, soft blue and silver instead of the frantic glimmers of the past days. Jace wasn't sure whether the peace came from the dome's stabilization or something more personal. You're up early, he said gently, though the idea of her sleeping at all still baffled him. Her species didn't rest so much as enter meditative discharges, floating in midair with all the serenity he'd never manage even with 3 cups of coffee. I wished to see the final readings, Kayla replied, stepping closer. And to see you. Jace's heart performed a double backflip that would have impressed any gymnast. Right, well, I'm here. Very seeable. Her laugh, 3 soft melodic tones filled the room. Humans are strange. You say so much without intention. You should hear us when we are intentional, he said. It's terrifying. She tilted her head, eyes glimmering. I have seen your terror. It is mostly you being worried about my safety, and fires, and explosions, and me. He froze for a moment, trying to decipher whether she meant fear, attraction, or something far stranger. But Kayla stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint microfractures her skin had suffered in the wreck, healing lines that shimmered like stardust. She reached up, fingertips hovering near his chest but not touching. Being this close to her always surprised him. Aliens weren't supposed to be warm, or gentle, or breathtaking in so many ways that made no logical sense. The council has made a decision, she said quietly, her glow dimming. Not sadness, more like apprehension. They wish to meet with you, regarding the bond. Jace groaned softly. Of course they do. Let me guess, they want a statement, a waiver. Maybe guidance counseling before one of us does something universally embarrassing. Kayla hesitated. They wish to determine whether our bond is deliberate. He blinked. It's not, is it? She looked away. That alone answered him, Kayla, he said softly. I didn't mean to force anything on you. I didn't even know I was were human, she interrupted gently. And that is what changed everything. Before he could respond, the door slid open and 3 Valeri council envoys floated inside. They were older, heavier, their crystalline skins carved with ceremonial ridges. Their eyes glowed with too much wisdom and not enough patience. Human Jace, their voices overlapped in harmonized tones that made the air vibrate. The repairs are complete. The dome is stabilized. And now, another matter demands attention. Jace braced himself. Let me guess. The whole accidentally forming an ancient heart bond with your princess thing. Kayla winced, whispering, Please never say that phrase again. But the envoys nodded gravely. Yes, that matter. The tallest envoy approached him. Human actions carry unintended resonance. Your intervention in the wreckage saved Keller's life. Your continued protection stabilized her cycle. Your proximity shaped her emotional harmonic field. These things, among our kind, are not trivial. I didn't do it to make a bond, Jace said firmly. We know. The envoy's glow flickered in muted understanding. That is precisely the problem. Jace blinked. What? Kayla stepped forward. Among the bonds formed unintentionally are considered the most genuine. They are rare. The envoy nodded. And irreversible without deep harm. Jace's stomach flipped. Harm to who? Kayla looked at him, eyes shimmering, voice barely above a whisper. Silence wrapped the room like heavy fabric. Jace's breath caught. The idea of hurting her emotionally, physically, spiritually felt like someone had carved a cold line through his chest. What does that mean, exactly? He asked, voice steady only because fear anchored it. It means, the envoy replied, that your bond must be acknowledged, not in ceremony, not in law, but in intent. Kayla stepped closer to him, her glow warming again. It means you must speak truth to the bond, whatever that truth is. If you care for me, even slightly, then say so. If you do not, you must say that too. The bond will respond. What happens if I don't know? He asked honestly. Keller's eyes softened. Then say that truth is better than silence. And what happens if I don't know? He asked honestly. Keller's eyes softened. Then say that truth is better than silence. Jace inhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling onto him like newly mended beams overhead. He looked at her, not at her glow, or her alien elegance, or her strange resonant laugh, but at the person who had trusted him, argued with him, misinterpreted him, and stood by him through chaos neither species trained them for. I care about you, he said finally, not because of the bond, not because of your people, just because you're you. And yeah, I'm confused, and scared, and very underqualified for whatever cosmic relationship counselor mess this is, but I'm here, and I don't want to hurt you. Keller's glow erupted into brilliant gold. She closed the distance between them, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth like a pulse. That, she whispered, is enough. The envoys bowed, their crystalline voices harmonizing in relief. The bond is stabilized. Jace looked between them and Kayla. So, what now? Kayla smiled, soft, bright, impossibly warm. Now, she said, we learn each other, slowly, carefully, recklessly, as humans do. Jace laughed breathlessly. Yeah, that sounds about right. And as the dome lights brightened to a new dawn, the galaxy continued spinning and changed in its vastness, but altered in one small corner where a human's instinctive compassion had reshaped the fate of an alien heart.